So hey everyone, let me tell you a story about creators and artists. A lot of them experience this itch for making things at various points in their lives, but many try to bury it as deep as they can, or at least ignore it for as long as possible. There are some that don't believe in themselves, others are repeatedly told not to take an interest in that stuff, a few try to hide it simply because they're ashamed, and things like that. The reason why many try their best to get through all of that is usually because of how they feel with some part of the process. Whether that's fulfillment, happiness, amusement, excitement, whatever. It all comes down to they do it because they enjoy it. And this is something that applies to me as well, but it took a while before I accepted it. I had to go through many kinds of mediums, like video recording, stop motion, referencing, and whatever it is I do now. I always saw creation as something that was wonderful, yet maybe it wasn't for me. So I often tried to step away and do other stuff. But I kept going back to it somehow. No matter the project, it was just fun, so that's where my focus was all the time. The whole notion of making original things is something I never even thought of. But originality is actually a polarizing topic when it comes to creativity and creation. There are plenty of people who believe that it is not possible to produce something original, because they say that everything has been already done, or that anything we think of relies on ideas we've already been exposed to. And both of these points make sense when you think about it. Whenever we come up with a new idea, it can be traced back to our experiences, the things we look up to, or whatever inspires us. So it is inevitable that we take certain traits from those as we bring our creations to life. Besides, with the amount of people there are and have been, the odds of creating something that is unlike anything ever made is, well, it's how you end up with many cases where something gets published and just happens to be quite similar to something else without even knowing it existed. So the argument is that if all ideas are naturally transformative, then it has to be impossible for any creation to be original. But what I take away is a little different, because I believe that it simply means that originality is about execution instead. Execution instead. Reading is tough, man. You know, Anyway, I'm saying this because even when people use the same ideas, there's something different about the way in which they are expressed, you know? It's just surprising to me how I keep seeing the work that many people share online, and they keep finding ways to express themselves differently. And I bring this up because there is a surprising amount of artists and creators that torture themselves mentally. And it's frustrating because when we talk about a lack of originality, the issue is not with those that try to offer their take on pre-existing ideas. It's with those that don't care and simply take the entirety of other people's work for themselves. It's the kind of topic that many people are very familiar with. But let me show you another glimpse at what it's about. You know that throughout the history of the creative landscape, there has been stuff to ensure that original works are protected. But that has only gotten messier with time, to the point where we don't know who it helps anymore. When the internet came around, most of it became obsolete anyway, because creation is the most accessible it's ever been, and everything can be shared in seconds. Now, instead of limiting where to find things, companies are fighting each other to get royalties on whatever they can. As an example, let's say I happen to include the smallest piece of music like this bass line. Now I have to guess what I'm getting a claim for. The point is that, for a large number of people, sharing pieces of content has become a natural part of how daily conversation works. Downloading an image or a video is a usual habit, and that's actually kind of great. Until that content keeps being passed over with no source, and someone ends up with what's known as a banger tweet. Which is also great, I guess, but it's a big part of content theft. It's just not seen as such, because when we think of stolen content, we usually think about things like reactionless reaction videos, removing watermarks, not crediting someone, character thieves, and many other things. But with how many different forms of theft can exist, people have different criteria when labeling something as stolen or not, which can start getting confusing, and it prevents many from understanding the concept properly, and it's how you end up with many people accusing others of theft when they aren't stealing anything. So let's go ahead and try to narrow it down a bit. Like I said earlier, taking pre-existing stuff is the basis to create new things. So it's simple, right? For something to not be considered stolen, we just need it to be fully transformative. But that just makes us go in circles. And I just lost the desire to try anymore. Because outside of the obvious cases, it's kind of hard to determine where a line could be drawn since it's something that is so subjective. And it can get worse if we take a look at these. For example, let's take a word that as soon as you mention it can cause people to beat you up on the street. The thing with this is that it usually makes people think of someone tracing over someone else's work so they can pass it off as their own. Which is a real problem because it happens a lot. A lot. But even outside of specific circumstances where it's acceptable, many people don't care as much when something has reached meme status. And memes are in a weird place of the transformative spectrum, because there is a collective understanding on what a meme is, I think. The unspoken rule online is that it doesn't matter who made it, you can just take it and go with it. And all it takes for many memes to be transformed entirely is a small change done in a couple of seconds. So, stealing memes is really nothing. At least for the most part, because there are also those that spend hours or days making insanely high quality edits. And that's when theft becomes a problem. Especially because when their work is stolen, there are people that blame them for caring too much in the first place. It's a fairly common critique that is given to many types of content and art, and it's one more thing that encourages the general disregard for the value of the work people put online. Another thing is just that content theft is normalized to the point where it's cyclical. You've probably caught people posting something to a community and then someone else reposts it shortly after, sometimes in the same community and on the same day. It's what we sort of expect to see from social media, which is how lots of brands, outlets, and independent accounts have been built up just by stealing. If something takes years to get noticed, one of these accounts re-uploads it, gets interactions, traffic, maybe even ad campaigns, and the original creators get credit at the bottom and probably 5 more views. It also kinda comes down to convenience a lot of the time, since asking people to go all the way to an entirely different site to see just one thing feels like a bother. So reposting and stealing is just more convenient for seeing stuff. On top of that, there has been a lot of speculation about posts with links performing worse than anything else, which would make sense if it's true, because they need users to remain on the platform, and everyone is fighting to get content to provide these days. Why would you put measures to stop the spread of stolen content if it's convenient for you as a platform and your users, right? Now, of course, there is the option to fill a form where they get back to you after a few days with a rejected appeal, but if it happens to go through, the damage has been already done anyway. The reality is that lots of people just try to happily come to terms with their work being stolen. And I'm not saying anybody should get attacked if they happen to forget to credit every single aspect of something whenever they make a post either. All I ask is that if you have the chance to embed something, consider sharing a link. If you see a post on the same platform you're on that you want to show others, boost it instead of reposting it. Some sites even have the option to download a post with attribution built into it. And little things like that go a long way in helping creators and artists that are already struggling to grow. However, I also recognize that when people try to build a practice and do the right thing, you find certain issues like sharing something with attribution and it's crediting the wrong person, or sharing a link to a post and it has a make an account wall. Sometimes you don't have a source at all when you find something. So, my point is, it's just about trying. And it's easy to tell when content theft is done when there's no choice or by mistake, and when it's simply out of carelessness. For that, let's go back and take a look at one of the biggest parts of the whole problem. There's this thing where people make a very minor change to an original creation so they can get away with stealing it, and it surprisingly works in the eyes of many. For example, think about someone spending days creating an independent animation that's a parody of something else. And later, another user takes it and re-uploads it as a comparison video, ending up with 3 times the animation's views. It has proven to be a clean way to re-upload something, where everyone's happy except the person who did all the work. The reason these are so successful is because there's a demand to publish content fast while being as consistent as possible to try to just maintain an online presence. If someone happened to spend 5 months without uploading, they would rarely get any traffic, and a lot of people would forget they even exist. So most people feel like they cannot afford to stay stagnant. And since this demand encourages and even favors theft, it leads many down the path of reaction content. It somehow became a very popular format of content, and many people try to justify it because they say it helps everyone, but all it's doing is giving people this chance to earn a small exposure cut, while someone is actually profiting from their work. But what about fair use? So, fair use is part of current copyright law in some countries, but it's pretty outdated with how people create content today anyway. So we kinda have to rely on an honor system, which, as you can see, is working great for everyone. My take on it is basically punching up instead of down, with things like replayability or providing a different experience to be exceptions to the boundaries of fair use. At least, it's how it should be, because when people use a few songs from video games or republish stuff like advertisements, it doesn't drive people away from those things. But when it's independent creators, it just adds to what has already been a losing battle since they started. To be honest, I enjoy reaction content when it's done well, but it's very easy to tell between the good and the hurtful kind. The latter is usually seen more often on streaming, and some people do it occasionally and don't think too much of it, maybe genuinely not knowing that it's damaging because it's that normalized. It just sucks, because all of these things keep on damaging the mentality that general audiences have on the value of content. Especially the ones that are growing up with this, because it reinforces the idea that the work of creators and artists is meaningless and that you can get away with these things. It adds a new layer to how lots of people continue to get taken advantage of by not getting any sort of compensation after working on their designs, stories, animations, drawings, or anything. There are plenty of cases that people are easily catching up on, like when people try to make an argument to not pay for work, or when artists make a commission and they are ghosted afterwards, or the amount of bots that repost and even sell stolen art. It's an issue that's big enough to the point where some people can't even tell they're being taken advantage of. What I'm trying to say is that it always comes down to the perception that many people have of artists and creators' work. That's why many find themselves undercharging, or even feeling guilty at the thought of being paid at all, believing that anyone with any skill could have done what they did, while sometimes ignoring years of practice or all the effort they put to get to where they are. Whenever something is stolen online, a lot of people place the blame on the artist or creator, demanding them to add 50 watermarks, or telling them that nobody's forcing them to make things, and that they shouldn't be doing art or content for any kind of compensation, but only because they enjoy it. Essentially, they take what should be a motivator and reason for people's work, and try to turn it into a justification for stealing their time and effort with no consequence. These are people that spend a lot of time doing things you love, and while sharing links and crediting posts will not magically fix everything else, trying to change the perception of something we interact with every day is a good starting point.
Alejandro?
What?
This is just not that good of a story.
What are you talking about?
At the beginning you said, "Hey everyone, let me tell you a story about..."
Yeah. What's wrong with it?
Well, lots of filler with the originality bit, and then you just start talking about memes and...
Listen, like...
It's alright, man. Everyone tells bad stories from time to time. Plus, it's the internet, so don't take it that seriously.